My parents threw me out with nothing but a trash bag, convinced I was the failure of the Hughes legacy in this story of family betrayal, while they saw my sister as the perfectionist. 10 years later, I walked back through those doors not as their daughter, but as the lead forensic auditor sent to investigate their missing millions. My name is Vivian Hughes, and for a decade, that name was a curse I whispered to myself in the dark, a reminder of everything I wasn't supposed to be. But in this family drama, names have power, and depending on who holds the pen, a name can either be a signature of prestige or an indictment of fraud. To understand the sheer magnitude of the satisfaction I felt walking into that glass-walled skyscraper, you have to understand the architecture of my childhood. The Hughes family was not just a family, it was a brand. My father, Richard, was a real estate mogul whose smile was as polished as the marble floors of his hotel lobbies. My mother, Catherine, was the queen of the city's philanthropic scene, a woman who treated charity galas like battlefields, where social standing was the only territory worth conquering. And then there were the daughters, two of us. There was Sarah, and there was me. Sarah was the masterpiece. She was 3 years older, blonde, effervescent, and possessed a terrifying ability to lie with a smile that could melt glaciers. She was the golden child, the one destined to take over the Hughes Foundation, the family's massive charitable arm that ostensibly supported underprivileged youth, but mostly supported my parents' tax breaks and ego. Then there was me. I was dark-haired, quiet, and obsessed with details. I didn't care about the galas or the networking or the fake smiles. I liked puzzles. I liked truth. I was awkward at parties, often hiding in the library rather than mingling with the senators and CEOs my parents were trying to impress. In the Hughes household, being introverted was diagnosed as a character flaw. Being average was treated like a terminal illness. Growing up, the dynamic was subtle at first, then suffocating. If Sarah broke a vase, it was an accident caused by the maid placing it too close to the edge. If I dropped a fork at dinner, it was evidence of my inherent clumsiness and lack of grace. Sarah's C- in math was the teacher's fault. My A- in history was proof I wasn't trying hard enough to get the A+. The escalation toward my exile began during my final year of high school. The pressure in the house was volcanic. Sarah had just graduated from college with a degree purchased through generous donations rather than academic rigor, and she was stepping into a junior executive role at the foundation. I was applying to universities, desperate to get away. I remember one specific Tuesday evening. It was raining, the kind of heavy, relentless rain that batters the windows. I was in the study, finishing a calculus problem set, when my father walked in. He didn't knock. He never knocked. He tossed a heavy leather folder onto the desk, scattering my papers. He told me that Sarah had made a small accounting error in her personal finances and that the bank was asking questions. He needed me to claim the account was mine. He wanted me to say I had opened it in her name as a prank, or a mistake, or whatever lie he had concocted. He wanted me to take the fall for what looked like a credit card fraud issue. I refused. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment, as your feedback helps to improve the stories coming. For the first time in my life, I looked Richard Hughes in the eye and said no. I told him I wouldn't ruin my credit and my record before I even started my life just because Sarah couldn't stop spending money she didn't have. The rage that followed wasn't hot, it was cold. It was the terrifying, silent anger of a man who is never denied. He didn't yell. He just looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and disgust, as if I were a bad investment he needed to liquidate. The final straw came 2 months later. It was the week of my graduation. The house was in chaos preparing for the annual Hughes charity ball. A diamond bracelet, an heirloom worth more than my college tuition, went missing from my mother's vanity. Naturally, the inquisition began. The staff was interrogated, but my mother's gaze landed firmly on me. Sarah, weeping crocodile tears in the corner, mentioned that she had seen me admiring it. She said she heard me talking about how much money I would need for an apartment if I moved out. It was a lie, a beautifully constructed, effortless lie. They searched my room, and of course, they found it. It was tucked deep inside my pillowcase, a place I never would have hidden it if I were actually a thief, but the perfect place to plant it if you wanted it to be found. I pleaded, I screamed, I begged them to look at the logic, to look at the fingerprints, to just listen to me. But they didn't want the truth. They wanted a scapegoat. They wanted to cleanse the house of the daughter who didn't fit the brand. That night, my father handed me a black, heavy-duty trash bag. He told me I had 10 minutes to pack my things. He said I was a thief, a liar, and a stain on the Hughes legacy. He said that if I wasn't his daughter, he would have called the police. He acted like he was doing me a mercy. I packed blindly, shoving clothes, a few books, and my laptop into the plastic sack. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely close the twist tie. When I walked down the grand staircase, my mother wouldn't even look at me. Sarah stood at the top of the landing, her arms crossed, watching with a look of bored satisfaction. My father opened the heavy oak front door. The rain from months ago seemed to have returned, a cold drizzle that misted the porch. He looked at me and delivered the words that would fuel me for the next decade. He said, "Vivian, you are a failure. You have no business instinct, no loyalty, and no future. Do not contact us. Do not use our name. As far as we are concerned, we have one daughter." He shut the door. The sound of the lock clicking into place was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The first year was hell. I slept in a shelter for 3 weeks until I found a job waiting tables at a diner that operated 24 hours a day. I rented a room in a basement that smelled of mold and old cigarettes. I was 19, alone, and terrified. But I was also free. I realized quickly that I had something my family didn't know about. I had a brain that devoured data. While my sister had charm, I had logic. I enrolled in community college, paying my way with tips and sleep deprivation. I discovered accounting. To most people, accounting is boring. To me, it was a language of absolute truth. Numbers don't lie. They don't have favorites. They don't plant jewelry in pillowcases. If the equation doesn't balance, there is a reason. And if you dig deep enough, you will always find it. I transferred to a state university on a full scholarship. I graduated top of my class. I passed my CPA exam on the first try with a score in the top 1% of the country. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to be the hunter, not just the scorekeeper. I specialized in forensic accounting. I became a certified fraud examiner. I spent the next 9 years working for Sterling & Vance, one of the most ruthless and prestigious audit firms in the world. I built a reputation. I was the woman you called when you suspected your CFO was buying yachts with company money. I was the auditor who found the needle in the haystack and then burned the haystack down. I was cold, precise, and unrelenting. I became wealthy, not through inheritance, but through billable hours and performance bonuses. I bought a penthouse in the city, tailored my suits, and wore heels that clicked on the floor with the sound of incoming judgment. Then came the call. It was a Monday morning, 10 years after I had been kicked out. The managing partner, Mr. Vance, summoned me to his office. He looked uneasy. He told me we had a new client. A high-profile charity was under scrutiny by the IRS and major donors due to some irregularities in their quarterly reports. They needed a third-party forensic audit to clear their name and prove everything was above board. They specifically requested Sterling & Vance because they wanted the toughest auditors in the business to prove their innocence. Mr. Vance slid the file across the mahogany desk. The label read, "The Hughes Family Foundation." He knew my last name, of course, but Hughes is a common name. He didn't know the relation. He asked if I had a conflict of interest. I looked at the file. I thought about the trash bag. I thought about the rain. I thought about the lie that stole my youth. I looked Mr. Vance in the eye and said, "No conflict. I can remain objective." That was the only lie I told. I had no intention of being objective. I intended to be thorough. 2 days later, I stood in the lobby of the Hughes Tower. The security guard didn't recognize me. The receptionist didn't recognize me. I wasn't the scruffy, carified teenager in oversized hoodies anymore. I was a 30-year-old woman in a $2,000 suit, holding a briefcase that contained the power to destroy worlds. I took the elevator to the top floor. The executive suite hadn't changed. The same art, the same pretension. I was led into the conference room where the board of directors was waiting. And there they were. Richard and Catherine Hughes sat at the head of the table. They looked older. My father's hair was entirely white. My mother's face was tighter, the result of surgeries fighting a losing war against time. And to their right sat Sarah. She was the CEO now. She looked impeccable, dressed in white, projecting the image of the saintly charity head. But I saw the tension in her jaw. I saw the way her fingers tapped nervously against her tablet. Mr. Vance made the introductions. "This is our lead forensic auditor, the best in the firm. She will be conducting the investigation." I stepped forward. I didn't smile. I placed my briefcase on the table and clicked the latches open. The sound echoed in the silence. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady and professional. "My name is Vivian Hughes." The reaction was immediate and visceral. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face went from polite disinterest to shock, and then to a deep, flushing red. Sarah dropped her stylus. "Vivian?" my father choked out. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to audit your books, Richard," I said, using his first name. "You hired the best. Here I am." "We can't have her," Sarah snapped, finding her voice. She looked at Mr. Vance. "This is a conflict of interest. She's a disgruntled family member. She was kicked out for theft." Mr. Vance looked at me, surprised. "Is this true, Vivian?" I didn't flinch. I was a teenager accused of a crime with no evidence and removed from the home. I have no criminal record. I am a certified partner at this firm. If the Hughes Foundation has nothing to hide, my relation to the family shouldn't matter. In fact, who better to understand the intricacies of the family business? However, if you'd like to cancel the contract, you will be liable for the cancellation fee, and we will have to note in our report to the IRS that you refused cooperation with the auditor. I had them trapped. If they fired me now, it looked like an admission of guilt to the IRS. If they kept me, they had to let me see everything. My father glared at me, his eyes narrowing. He probably thought he could intimidate me, just like he did when I was 18. He thought I was still the girl with the trash bag. "Fine," he spat. "Do your audit. You won't find anything. We run a clean ship. Just don't expect a warm welcome on Sunday dinner." "I prefer to eat alone," I replied. The investigation took 3 weeks. I set up a command center in a conference room down the hall from Sarah's office. I requested everything: bank statements, expense reports, vendor contracts, payroll, donor lists. At first, the resistance was passive-aggressive. Files were lost. Passwords didn't work. Sarah would storm into my room demanding to know why I was looking at travel expenses from 3 years ago. Forensic necessity, I would say, not looking up from my laptop. Standard procedure. The first few days were slow. On the surface, the foundation looked solid. Massive donations came in, grants went out to orphanages and hospitals, but forensic accounting is about patterns. It's about the rhythm of the numbers, and the rhythm here was off. I started noticing a recurring vendor, Apex Consulting Group. They were billing the foundation for strategic development and logistical support. The bills were consistently just under $10,000, the threshold that usually triggers automatic extra scrutiny in banking systems. Over 5 years, these payments totaled nearly $4 million. I dug into Apex Consulting. The address listed was a P.O. box in a generic office park in Delaware. The phone number went to a voicemail that was full. I pulled the incorporation papers. The registered agent was a lawyer in Panama. A dead end for most people, but I wasn't most people. I cross-referenced the IP addresses used to access the Apex digital invoices. They didn't come from Delaware. They didn't come from Panama. They came from a residential IP address in the upscale district of the city. Specifically, they came from the penthouse apartment owned by Sarah Hughes. But that wasn't enough. I needed to nail it down. I needed to prove where the money went. I traced the wire transfers from the Apex account. They went into a labyrinth of offshore accounts, but eventually the money had to surface to be spent, and spend it she did. I found payments for a villa in Tuscany. I found payments for luxury cars. I found payments to a high-end jewelry broker. Then I found the pièce de résistance. 10 years ago, the week I was kicked out, a substantial withdrawal had been made from the foundation's petty cash fund, $5,000, the exact value of the bracelet I was accused of stealing. But the bracelet hadn't been bought with that money. The bracelet was an heirloom. So where did the cash go? I dug into the old archived emails from that week. I found a correspondence between Sarah and a fixer at the university she had attended. The subject line was grade adjustments. The price was $5,000. She had stolen from the company to bribe her way into graduation, and when the money was missed, she needed a distraction. The missing bracelet was the distraction. I was the collateral damage. By the end of the third week, I had built a case so airtight it could survive a nuclear blast. I had charts, I had graphs, I had the digital fingerprints of my sister stealing from the very orphans she claimed to protect. The final meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. The board was there. My parents were there. Sarah was there, looking pale and gaunt. She knew I was up to something. She just didn't know how much I knew. I connected my laptop to the projector. The screen lit up. "Thank you all for your patience," I began. "The audit is complete." I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a picture of the villa in Tuscany. "This is a beautiful property," I said, "valued at $3 million. It is currently owned by a shell company called Veritas Holdings. Does anyone know who owns Veritas Holdings?" Silence in the room. Sarah shifted in her seat. "Veritas Holdings is fully owned by Apex Consulting," I continued, "and Apex Consulting has been the recipient of $4.2 million of Hughes Foundation funds over the last 5 years for services that were never rendered." My father stood up. "What is this? What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Richard. I am stating facts. Apex Consulting is a fraudulent entity." I clicked to the next slide. It showed the IP logs. It showed the bank transfers. It showed Sarah's signature on the incorporation documents for Veritas, buried deep in the appendices I had subpoenaed from the Panamanian lawyer. "Sarah Hughes has been embezzling funds from this charity to fund a lifestyle she could not afford on her salary," I said. The words hung in the air like smoke. "That's a lie," Sarah screamed, jumping up. "She's lying. She's jealous. She's trying to frame me just like she stole the bracelet." I turned to her slowly. "I'm glad you brought up the bracelet, Sarah." I clicked the remote again. The email from 10 years ago appeared on the screen. The bribe for the grades. The withdrawal of the cash. "You didn't just steal from the company now, Sarah. You stole from it then. You used foundation money to buy your degree, and when you needed to cover the cash withdrawal, you staged a theft at home to blame me. You destroyed my life to cover up a $5,000 accounting hole." The room was silent. The board members were looking at Sarah with horror. My mother was weeping, her face buried in her hands. But my father was staring at the screen. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at the numbers. He was a businessman first and foremost, and he realized in that moment that his brand was dead. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "is this true?" "Daddy, she faked it. She's a computer genius. She made it all up," Sarah sobbed, reaching for his arm.
He pulled away. He looked at the undeniable proof on the screen. The dates, the times, the signatures. "Get out," he said to her. "What? Get out," he roared. "You stupid, greedy child. You've ruined us." "Richard," I interrupted, "it's a bit late for that. This report has already been sent to the IRS and the district attorney's office. I hit send 5 minutes before I walked into this room." My father swung his head around to look at me. The color drained from his face completely. You reported us? To the authorities? We are your family." "No," I said, feeling a sense of calm I had been chasing for 10 years. "You made it very clear that you have one daughter, and she is standing right there." I pointed at Sarah, who was hyperventilating. "I am just the auditor, and I have a fiduciary duty to report criminal activity." I packed up my laptop. The chaos in the room was escalating. Board members were shouting into their phones, calling their lawyers. Sarah was on the floor, hysterical. My mother was motionless. I walked toward the door. My father stepped in front of me. He looked broken. The arrogance was gone. "Vivian," he said, "please, we can fix this. We can say it back. We can say it was a mistake. Don't destroy the legacy. You're a Hughes." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a decade. I saw a man who cared more about his name on a building than the flesh and blood standing in front of him. "I'm not a Hughes," I said. "I'm the failure you threw out with a trash bag, remember?" I walked around him and exited the boardroom. The aftermath was exactly what you would expect. It was a media circus. The charity scam headlines ran for months. Sarah was arrested 3 days later. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. Because I had handed the DA a perfect case wrapped in a bow, she pleaded guilty to avoid a maximum sentence. She is currently serving 5 years in a federal prison. The Hughes Foundation was dissolved. The assets were seized to pay back the donors and the back taxes. My parents lost almost everything. The lawsuits from the donors they had defrauded took the rest. The mansion was sold. The cars were repossessed. They live in a small condo now on the outskirts of the city, shunned by the social circle that used to worship them. They tried to contact me a few times. My mother sent letters. My father left voicemails. They wanted help. They wanted money. They wanted forgiveness. I never replied. I still work at Sterling & Vance. I was promoted to senior partner last year. I have a beautiful life. I have friends who know me for who I am, not for my last name. I have a career built on truth. Sometimes, when it rains, I think about that night with the trash bag. I think about the fear and the cold. But then I look at my bank account, my reputation, and the empty chair where my sister used to sit, and I realize something important. They called me a failure. They said I had no future. But in the end, I was the only one who balanced the books. And let me tell you, the bottom line is beautiful. If you believe the truth always finds a way out, like the video, and please comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the story and want more revenge stories where betrayal meets consequences. Your feedback helps me to improve the videos.